We're going to expose Harvard for the liars they are. GOP Harvard graduates send scathing letter blasting school's response to pro-Hamas students abhorrent. Harvard has faced heated criticism after student groups expressed support for Hamas after its attack on Israel. Take a look at this tweet from James Lindsay. How it started and how it's going. It's a good one. And the first one is a quote. Despite being the most acclaimed academic institution in the country, Harvard received a 0.00 point free speech ranking on a 100-point scale, a full 11 points behind the next worst school. And then the response from the Harvard president over the pro-Hamas protests. Our university embraces a commitment to free expression. That commitment extends even to views that many of us find objectionable, even outrageous. We do not punish or sanction people for expressing such views. That's absolutely hilarious because they have criticized and condemned conservatives in the past. Yeah. The fact that they're unwilling to criticize this group and they're actually saying, well, you know, they're allowed to do it, shows Harvard overtly supports what these students are saying. The institutions are absolutely corrupted, but as horrifying as this situation in Israel is, we are now seeing the left overtly supporting acts of terror, killing of children, capturing and killing of civilians. And I appreciate their free speech. I'm glad they're saying the things they're saying. Yeah, I mean, and yet it is so poignant for me to see liberals of the old stripe. And here I'm actually thinking of the former Harvard president, Larry Summers. I don't know if you saw his statement. He's like, I'm so bitterly grieved that an institution to which I have been affiliated with for most of my adult life is, has sort of broken with the principles and is now taking the side of the terrorists. And I was thinking, wow, Larry Summers, if anyone would say, who's the embodiment of Harvard over the last 50 years? They would say you. You're the example of the kind of classical liberal that surrendered to the left over the past several, that enabled the leftist takeover of these institutions, because conservatives never ran these institutions. When I was a student at Dartmouth, I would say it was the old line liberals who were in charge and the new left pushing up against them. And the change in the college to today would be that insurgent group is now completely in charge and the old line liberals have been pushed aside. But the old line liberals let it happen. And they're now, in a sense, living with the fruit of it. It's a little bit like some of these women on the subway, you know, these bohemian women who are approached by people who like punch them and slap them. And you feel sorry for them, but you're like, isn't this what you voted for? Right. You know, if this guy had come and slapped some other woman and you saw it, you'd be like, don't go after that guy. He's a victim of racism. You know, let's not, Black Lives Matter. So you've got this. And then they get hit and go, help, I'm being oppressed. That's right. When it happens to them, suddenly the rules change. It's like when Elon Musk banned like those 5 journalists, leftists on Twitter for like one day. Not only did they go nuts, I mean, they were quoting John Stuart Mill. I mean, they were discovering the virtues of free speech, but only because it was happening to them. Yeah. Yeah, it's so exactly. Yeah. And therein lies the big challenge. But now, I mean, some of them stay true to their principles. There's that woman whose boyfriend was murdered in front of her. And the reports are that she's refusing to identify the murderer. What? But the conspiracy theory on X/Twitter is that it was a hit. Yeah, I heard that. And it's like, you know, I don't know about that, but I got to be honest. Are you really going to come out and claim to the police that the reason you're not identifying the killer is because that would be racist? Are the cops going to believe that? Be like, really? Someone murdered your boyfriend in front of you and you're like, but if he goes to jail, it's racist. So whoopsie. So a lot of people are convinced like there's no way someone watches their loved one die in front of them and then says, but because of racism, I think the killer should be free. Unless they wanted it to happen. I mean, it's easier if you're a journalist and, you know, the suspect is black, but you leave that fact out of the article, which we've been seeing in recent decades. But then at least you are not facing the consequences. It's easy it's kind of virtue on the cheap. I'm not going to mention that he's black, but, you know, I get some virtue points. But it's a whole nother matter if somebody comes and kills your kid. And you're facing, and you're not willing to say, okay, well, that guy did it. In the culture war, a lot of parents that we see waking up, it's because they're finally being impacted by it. And it's an unfortunate reality. Many years ago, Irving Kristol said that neoconservatism, which we've got a lot of problems with these days, but neoconservatism is when a liberal is mugged by reality. and that happens to people. We're seeing it now with Hamas. Yeah. Have you seen that meme? I don't know. I can try and pull it up. It's I'll try and find it. the political persuasion you gain when I don't know. I'll have to find it at some point, but it shows all the different things that turns you into various political ideologies. So it's like this graph, and it shows you get you pay your April 20th, and it's like become libertarian. Then it's like gets mugged, becomes conservative. Gets a speeding ticket, becomes liberal.
Is war on there? War starts, become authoritarian.
No. Like it's not on there. I don't know. I'll try and find it. But
you guys think that's natural and actually a good thing that we become more authoritarian when our livelihoods are threatened by war?
Well, I mean, look, I'm making this film, as you guys know, Police State, and I had to think to myself, how did this come to America? Because a police state is very alien to America. And then I realized that, paradoxically, this was a bipartisan creation of the aftermath of 9/11, because a lot of Americans, out of fear, were like, listen, we got these foreign terrorists. Who knows when this is going to happen again? We need to stop the next guy. So we're going to give the government all these new surveillance powers. We're going to basically give them a carte blanche, do whatever you want, never thinking that 10 years later, they would take all that armory of resources and then turn it domestically and say, all right, we'll now have a new target, domestic extremists.
Right.
And that changes the whole game. So that, in my view, was the sort of genesis of the American police state.
So it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction almost to being under attack without thinking about the long-term possibilities of that.
Yeah. Well, when you're in fear and you're in fear of attack, you tend to go to by any means necessary. That's a normal reaction. I mean, that's what you would think if outlaws surrounded your house. I need to fight this by any means necessary. And that's what leads you to think, I'm going to give the government these powers that I wouldn't normally give them. This is why the left loved COVID. Same thing.
Exactly.
They're like, COVID creates a wartime environment in which people are full of fear. And when you're full of fear, you also trust experts. Here's a man in a white lab coat. Take this. This pill will make you feel better. You're like, oh, okay. No one's going to be like, well, why are you giving me these tests, doctor? What are these tests really for? And what does this pill really do? You defer to people who supposedly are experts on all this. And so this is a wonderful way for the left to make political advances operating through the fear of the American people.
Do you think there are environments where you can kind of change your society into a military society, a militocracy, without it turning on itself?
Well, the Spartans did that for centuries. They had a very militaristic culture, and they would train kids. They essentially had martial academies as a substitute for schools, and fighting was their education. And they were the best at it, and they developed all these amazing techniques. Basically, you'd have a phalanx, and everybody would hold a shield. You're not defending yourself with your shield. Your shield defends the guy to the right. And you're defended by the shield of the guy to your left. And so the Spartans would move in a phalanx. I mean, they were so formidable that in the Peloponnesian War, the Greeks could not fight them. So the Athenians decided when the war started, we're going to abandon all our land and go to sea because we can't fight the Spartans one-on-one. We'll let the Spartans come and take all our land.
However, eventually, the weakness with the phalanx was discovered, and they began flanking them.
Well, not only that, but the Spartans also didn't like technology. Apparently, someone came to the Spartan king, Archidamus, and told him, we've invented a way to launch a projectile, so we don't actually have to fight man to man. And the Spartan king said, I will give you a reward. Speak to no one about this invention, because if this invention becomes widespread, basically military valor will disappear in Sparta.
Wow.
So they were more concerned with maintaining the military virtue than having this kind of new gadget.
There's something to that, though. With the advent of the cartridge, you ended up with conscription. I mean, there was always some form of conscription, but widespread military conscription came to be when you didn't need to train people.
Yes, because anyone could fight.
As soon as you had... so obviously with the musket, you start seeing more and more of it. There's always some kind of we have to go and fight to varying degrees. But then when you got... the reloadable cartridge, you end up with the U.S. going to all these countries and being like, not necessarily the U.S., but many weapons manufacturers, and saying, now your farmers can fight. Hand them this, tell them to point and click. All they need to be trained is how to reload. And they're going to miss a whole lot, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know technique anymore. I watched that movie. I think it's The Last Samurai. I could be wrong.
Tom Cruise?
It might have been The Last Samurai, maybe not. I don't know. I watched a movie where it was, I think this is what it was. It's in the 1800s, and it's around when...
Yeah, the end of the Meiji.
Yeah. And so the samurai who are trained and were these elites were no longer necessary, and they were losing political power.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it's crazy. And soon it's going to be a dude in a pod in an underground base with a headset on flying a drone.
Yeah.
We're already basically there, but I mean, like, the future of warfare is going to be silly because it's going to be drones fighting drones.
Yeah, it's so true.
You're going to be in a factory and you're going to be in a conflict zone, and then it's going to be like the alarm's going to go off and it's like, flee. All the humans are going to evacuate, and then it's going to be a bunch of weird drones just crashing into each other and robot dogs shooting at each other.
And we'll see another Sparta-like situation where the people from the military-industrial complex and the governments are going to be like, no, we want to use the weapons that we have. We really want to use our F-17s. We got to use our long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. And at the same time, you're getting ripped apart by drones or some stupid new tech that's like, well, if we use that, then we're not going to be able to use our toys. It's like, you got to adapt. You're going to have to adapt really rapidly to the new type of war.
I mean, look, it was in the 80s, Terminator? The concept of an AI taking over our weapons before we even had developed technology. It's really incredible. It leads me to believe we're probably going to build warp engines and go travel the galaxy, because in the 80s, when computers were trash, they were like, one day computers will be so strong and so smart, they'll take everything over. Now we're looking at AI, and it's terrifying.
I mean, the genius of that movie, Terminator 1, I think was the best, but 2 was pretty good too, is that it made an accurate call in a way that earlier science fiction never did. You go back and read H.G. Wells, in the early part of the 20th century, and he has the idea that you'd have these massive lumbering robots like 20 feet tall with big legs, and they'd be doing all this work for us. But Terminator, I think, was a very thought-provoking movie in its own way, and underestimated at the time. But in retrospect, I think it's like one of these movies like Shawshank Redemption. Over time, it gets better.
I think Terminator 2 was the big one. Like, Terminator was good. They made a sequel, and Terminator 2 was just
2
like
was
it.
huge. Guns N' Roses had a song in it. Obviously, Eddie,
They were like,
the
Arnold
kid,
needs to be the good guy.
Sarah Connor. I mean, it was a female hero. The
That's
whole
right.
thing, like the main character was this badass woman. It was awesome. Like Alien. It was James Cameron, same director as Alien.
Yep.
So he's really good at creating. At that point, he was. Well, what's your fear with AI? Have you been studying it? Have you done any documentaries on it yet?
I haven't, no, but it's, no, I think it changes the rules of the game in so many ways. I was telling Tim earlier that I walk into my podcast, and the guy does the technical work on the podcast, he took my last podcast and he put in some AI, and there I am speaking fluent Spanish. And my mouth is moving, and and my wife who's Venezuelan, she's like, she was like stunned, speechless for a moment, because. So think about just from that simple idea, the possibilities of manipulation. I mean, I can see the promise of it, but I can also see the peril of it.
Well, here's the start. Within a couple of years, YouTube rolls out the auto translate button. Oh yeah. That will just press a button, and then all of a sudden everyone's speaking Spanish or German or Japanese, and then from there you have the technology to just create a podcast. Yeah. You could literally just we're almost to the point where you can type in to one of these AIs, give me an episode of Timcast IRL with Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, and Donald Trump, and it will AI generate the whole thing, and it will seem real. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.